All right, I think we can introduce our guest. We're honored to welcome guest speaker Robert Jean. He's a highly experienced city manager with decades of public service and small city leadership. Mr. Jean served as the first city manager for both Newcastle and University Place and played a key role in 5 successful incorporations across Washington State. That's Edgewood, Lakewood, Shoreline, Liberty Lake, and Spokane Valley. He also advised other communities considering incorporation, including Silverdale and Hazeldale. Over his 35-year career, Robert managed 7 cities full-time and supported 6 more in retirement, specializing in small city governance, fiscal responsibility, and improving community quality of life. He's also served as president of the Washington City County Management Association and as a board member of both the Association of Washington Cities and International City/County Management Association. It's a unique opportunity to learn from someone with direct hands-on experience in starting and managing cities, what challenges they face, how they grow, and what lessons Birch Bay might take from their success. Please welcome Robert Jean. Would you like a chair?
I'm gonna pull one up here.
Stand and talk.
Guys hear me okay back there? Yeah. I was gonna, if you wanna stretch your legs like I'm doing and move it up, this would be a good, it's a church. I know everybody likes to sit in the back row. Here next to Lisa. If you want to grab that one, I'll put my notes. Matt and I were talking over dinner tonight. He hosted me, by the way, that wasn't committee expense. I got a call from Charmaine, I think it was about this time last year. Friend of mine, Steve Peterson, who was the first mayor in Liberty Lake, which is a city about the size you guys are today. And they're growing some, but you've got a growth forecast. And you're gonna be larger than them, but it's a good comparable, I think. One of the lessons that I learned in working with different communities that form new cities. And by the way, we didn't know when they called me whether I had a friend of mine who lived here in Birch Bay, and I'd been up here and visited years ago, and boy, you know, I can see the change. But what I learned by working with other new cities, all of the new cities had 3 things that they were really interested in as drivers for incorporation. And the first question that everybody asks is, how can we possibly afford this? This is going to cost more. You can't have more service and less cost. It can't happen. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Well, the first reason to incorporate is local control. And that's how you control those levels of services and those costs. And I was, by the way, the work that been done so far by the committee and the work that Jonathan just did, I just got to look at tonight, but it's very good. And when Charmaine called me last year, we didn't know whether it would be feasible or not. My initial look was it might be marginal. And that's kind of what the study was in 08. It was positive but close. And what happened, we're going back up here. As we got more and more information, it kept getting more favorable in the look. Can you, in fact, provide more services at less cost? And the more I got involved with the committee and started looking at stuff, and then this is the first forecast I've actually seen in a budget format, really laid out, not just kind of guessing. And when I was kind of looking at it without a lot of, my guess was, yeah, it probably would work. I'm waiting to see what the consultant comes up with, CAI. My guess is these numbers are very conservative. My guess is CAI's numbers are going to be even more positive for local control. And that's the first reason you should incorporate, is that local control. It's boring. It's not the one that everybody gets excited about, except when you tie local control to levels of service and taxes. And that kind of usually gets the blood flowing. The second reason all the cities, new cities, wanted to incorporate was get control over the growth. Washington State's growing. And the state, if you don't know how the system works, the State Office of Financial Management does a growth forecast for the state. They break down every city and county share, and they tell you, you will provide, when you do your comp plan update, you will provide for X number of people. And whether you stay with the county, whether you should annex to Blaine, which you shouldn't, their numbers are worse than yours. But if you stay with the county's doing a reasonably good job with what they've got to work with. And so my experience has been cities can actually partner with counties. The county understands that this is a net revenue generating area. You generate more money than the county provides service. And in that gap, all you have to do is take the existing structure and reallocate it from what the county's keeping, and then they give back a little. But counties aren't built to be cities. Cities are built to be cities. The Growth Management Act actually says urban means city. And the unincorporated urban area is just a transitional period. Eventually, it's intended that all the urban areas will be in incorporated cities. And that's pretty well filled out now in King County. There's very little unincorporated urban area left in King County. Most of King County has annexed. Same as getting very close in Pierce County, two of the largest counties in the state. Frankly, the growth rate here in Whatcom County is pretty amazing what's going on. I think people were kind of moving north out of Seattle, and then they hit the border and stopped. And so, well, this is a nice place. But the first reason people incorporate is local control, and that includes taxes and levels of service and mix of service and taxes. I'll talk more about that in a sec. The second reason is growth management. And really, the question is not, are you going to grow? You're going to grow. The state law is going to mandate it, and the county will be forced to make room for their share of that growth, just as the city will. So the real question, if you're going to decide to incorporate it, is do we want to control that growth, or do we want the folks at the county? And that's not bashing the county. The county's done a reasonably good job there of county governments in this state. Whatcom County has a great county reputation. So it's not about the city, bad, and the county's bad, and the city's. It's not that. Counties are built differently. They're built to do different things. And they come much closer to trying to put out a level of service that they spread around all the areas of the county. You, as a new city, would have the choice of targeting how you reallocate those dollars. And targeting those dollars is really key. The third thing is public safety. Well, you don't need me to tell you. I've spent my life 35 years before I retired, and then started doing a bunch of interim city manager positions. And public safety is always an issue. By state law, if you are a city, the city is responsible for coordinating the overall emergency management response. So the city would be responsible for working with the fire district, with the county office of emergency management, and the city. But the city has the lead legal responsibility. Obviously, fire, you have a fire district. Just with the folks I've met, pretty good confidence in the fire district. They have a large area to serve. You've got one station not too far, just a little to the east. It's
nice, good-looking station. So coordinating with the fire district would be your first outreach, not trying to get into the fire service business. First of all, fire services are very expensive. You were talking about the average per police officer cost. That's the fully supported cost. That's salary and benefits and dispatch and support services, all of that. But fire districts, the cost per firefighter, they're even more. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of the specialty pay they have as paramedics and that type of thing. So local control, growth management, public safety. The oddball out is what can the sheriff provide versus what could the city provide? I think when you get the CAI study, get the report, you're going to see some revenues that are even more positive, and you may be able to have, my guess is you're probably going to be, well, I'm guessing, we guarantee with the numbers you looked at, you're going to be able to afford at least one police officer in the city, not responding from a huge patrol district in the county. Your average response time in an emergency here is over 15 minutes, half hour sometimes.
Depends.
Yeah.
45 minutes.
45 minutes. Yeah, and that's not bad, given that district that patrol deputy has to cover. And if he's at the far end of that district and getting here at the other end, it takes a while. You're going to be able to afford at least one on duty. You'll have a chief, probably 2 sergeants, maybe 10 patrol officers. That's going to be a little more than 11. I think you'd be closer to 12 or 13. But that's going to give you, in an emergency, a 5-minute response time. And that'd be if you're at the furthest, well, it might be 10 if you're at the way south end and you have to go to the way north end. But you're going to be able to significantly improve police services and response times. Those are the 3 main reasons that cities incorporate. Several other points just in general. Back to my opening comment, though, when I was first approached by the committee, I didn't know. I saw the results of the 2008 study, said it looks like things have gotten more favorable in the growth and what's happened since then. So I would expect that would be better. One of the other items that's affecting your sales tax revenue is Amazon. This is Land's End. This is where I got these jeans. Anyway, I think everything I'm wearing was ordered online. And up until, I think it was 2008, maybe 2010, sales taxes were distributed by the point of sale. In our area, University Place is about close to 40,000 now. When we incorporated, we were about 30, but that was 30 years ago. But if I ordered a new refrigerator in University Place from a appliance store in Lakewood, or in this case, if you ordered a new refrigerator from an appliance store in Bellingham, okay, who would get the tax? Bellingham? Yeah, no, the warehouse that shipped it. Wherever that warehouse was. Could have been out of Kent, anywhere. It was crazy. It had no relationship to the person paying the tax and their jurisdiction, city or county, getting service. Ever since the internet sales tax, there's reasons for that, I won't go into it, but it had to do with interstate commerce. And calculating local tax rates was too complex. And the courts ruled that it violated the interstate commerce clause. Well, with computers now, you just give me a zip code, you can figure out the total tax rate and distribute it. That's a huge difference. When I was the city manager in Puyallup, South Hill Mall, auto dealers, downtown Puyallup, we generated, at the time that University Place incorporated, Puyallup was generating about $650 per person in sales tax. So those are 30-year-old numbers now. Tacoma, for example, was generating about average, about 250. University Place was generating 40. Okay, that was the difference in how the sales tax distribution works. But with the internet sales tax and the distribution and shift towards online, University Place's sales tax is now pushing 1 million. You were looking at a number that the average may be looked at about 2.1 million. So when I say Birch Bay looks stronger than the averages that I'm seeing, I'm talking about new cities. The real reason that the unincorporated areas were not annexed was they weren't revenue positive. They didn't have a strong sales tax base. University Place didn't have an auto dealership, didn't have a mall, didn't have a downtown redevelopment. It does, well, I wish it did. I've been trying to tell the city manager that he needs to put into the city newsletter where their Carvana site, how to order on Carvana or any of the online cars. That would be the next strategy, but that's a conversation for Steve and I later. So your sales tax revenues are stronger than the average new city that I have seen. Your property tax revenues are stronger. I believe at a recent county meeting, the county administrator said that Birch Bay generates as much property tax for the county as the refineries do.
Really?
Yeah, you guys are not a poor case to be pitied. Okay, this community is very feasible as a standalone new city, and you can do it without increasing taxes. You just have to redistribute the taxes that exist. And you can actually do it for less because, and it didn't show up in these comparisons the way they were drawn, but the statute limits cities for their share to about $1.06. I think it's $1.65. Or I'm not, it's been a while since I had to do that, or it might be $1.67. And the county for the police levy is about what, 180? Somebody gave me that number.
It was 1.8.
What is it?
1.8 or 1.83.
1.8. Okay, so 1.8 compared to $1.65. So that difference is automatically a savings. That tax is called the county road tax, which doesn't go to roads. It basically funds police.
Yeah.
And every county uses it for that. And your rates are pretty reasonable. But it's also one of the reasons why the sheriff doesn't have more deputies to give better response times. Again, that's my comment about not bashing the sheriff. The county's doing what a county does. And they're not a city. And the one number I'd like to have CAI take a look at is updating Jonathan's numbers, not only the vacation rental allocation, because I think that's going to be a big number. And it'll be kind of like the internet sales tax. It's going to make a big difference from the 2008 study. 2008, there was no internet sales tax, and vacation rental taxes were minimal, if even existed. But the other area to look at in the revenue side, when CAI does their study, is going to be how those caps actually forecast. There were 13 new cities incorporated since 1990. And I still think all, if not most, are still less expensive than having stayed under county government after 25, 30 years. So, you know, if people say, well, with local control, could we vote to increase our taxes if we wanted to? Yes, you could. Have most of the new cities done that? No. Most of them have kept their taxes about the same or a little less than when they incorporated. University Place was about 35,000 when we incorporated. We're about 40 now. we incorporated with a city tax rate at the $1.65. I think it's $1.65. And it's now at $1. And that's with a recently voter approved law enforcement levy. It was less than $1 per thousand. Who's in the homeowners association? Michael, you live in, and I understand you guys pay about 200. How much do you pay a month?
Yeah. Well, it's an annual,
How much?
but it's about 230.
210. 210.
About how much a month?
$210 a month.
Two-
in
210?
village. Yeah.
So about 210 a month. My total property tax to the city of University Place is $600 per year. Per year, not 210 per month. So it's half of what they're paying in the association dues. And who are the cities, do you remember off the top of your head, Jonathan? Who were the cities that were less expensive than their host county? I mean, who that were more?
They're more expensive?
Yeah, there were about two of them, I think, if it's,
The one he lives in.
Yeah.
how
We've
much?
got too many police officers. They'll pull you over in your golf cart. It's impressive.
So which cities,
Liberty Lake pays just like a cent more, and then we showed on this graph, that was the only one on this graph that I could pull up the total.
so Liberty Lake, well, that's a city about your size. They do have a pretty robust city Parks and Rec district. So you would have to, as a comparable, look at adding in your Parks and Rec district tax, but I understand that's not much. So I think it's safe for me to say, we'll let CAI and the committee finish their work. But certainly most, if not all, of the new cities are about the same or less after 25 or 30 years. So incorporating doesn't mean ipso facto, your property taxes have to go up. Just the opposite. Now, we can talk about organization theory and why is that? It's kind of in the airline business, they talk about legacy airlines that were established a long time ago, you know, Delta, American, United. And then there's startup airlines that are less expensive. Southwest, Frontier, I'm trying to think of some of the, they don't have some of the ongoing costs. They don't have people that they're paying retirement to. The new cities don't have any prior, or the new airlines don't have any prior employees, so they're not paying that. The legacy costs of the older established cities are significant. And as a new city, you don't have that. So when it comes to local control, there's that, well, you folks are pretty fiscally conservative. You guys aren't wild card crazy stuff that I've seen. And you're just not going to do that to yourself. You know, your costs are going to be about the same or less than having stayed with the county. And then additional to that, you're going to do a better, more tailored job of growth management. You want to stay involved with the county in this cycle of the comp plan, but that's not over forever. You have the ability then, as soon as you're incorporated, you can start to review your comp plan and start to detail your zoning codes and other things right off the bat. And then public safety, the police, you already know my thoughts on that. You're going to be looking at 5-10 minute response times instead of half an hour. Let me sit down so my old knees don't give out on me here. Oh, see a few other knee knockers out there.
Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like in a newly incorporated city? What are the first few years like?
Checked it. What happens when right now you go through the feasibility stage. Does this make sense? From a growth management and local control and public safety. The more we learn about it in this period of time, and I really think, big thanks to the county government for hiring CAI and getting a good third-party look at where we are today. That's all good. But the feasibility stage, then you end up, okay, now we need to decide, we're gonna do this or not. And then you're gonna have a community group that gets together and some folks will be for it, some will be against it. You'll have town halls and you'll go through that. If you stay on track, Matt, you're thinking you might be on the ballot in November of '06?
26, yeah, kind of the goal.
Okay, so assume you're on the ballot in '26 and assume you say yes. Then shortly after that, people will start running for city council, assuming you propose under the chapter in the state laws 35A, which is the non-charter local control city. And the advantage of that was a question you had, the advantage of the non-charter locally controlled city is that you have the same powers as any other city in the state. So if Seattle can do something, you can. Not that you want to, but if you wanted to, you would have the power and the authority under local control. And so then you do your vote. By May, you're going to have a city council. And at that point, you're going to start what they call the interim period. You're not legally a city yet, but you have some legal authority. And you're going to go through May, June, July, August, about a 3-4 month period to get all of your local control authority adopted. Every ordinance or resolution that you might need the day that you become a city. And in our case, we incorporated on August 20. And on August 20, we legally flipped the switch and University Place became a city. Followed the same pattern in Newcastle, which by the way is about the same size as you guys. Little side story there, just a little piece of information. When they had started the incorporation study, included an area along Lake Washington called Newport Hills. So Newcastle is between Bellevue and Renton. And if you're not familiar with it, it's an old mining area. And they had coal mines up there. And there's a train, a locomotive that dropped off a barge and it's down in the bottom of Lake Washington.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But there's Newcastle and Newport Hills. The Newport Hills area was pretty favorable economically. And Bellevue, essentially short story, Bellevue annexed it before Newcastle could incorporate. So 6 months later, they changed the name to Newcastle because that really reflected the area there. So I do have the distinction because for a while there, 6 months, it was Newport Hills. I have the distinction of being the only city manager ever for the city of Newport Hills. So I tell that with some looking back on things. So after the interim, let's say August, this time next year, you would be a city and you would start putting stuff together. The first thing the city council is going to want to do is they're going to want to put together a budget, and they would have worked on that as a draft during the interim. And they're going to want to be very conservative and worry about, well, we don't want to overspend. And I'll tell you that a friend of mine, a guy named Al Locke, and Al was the city manager for years in Kirkland and kind of a godfather to those of us that were much younger when Al was mentoring me. But he told me, he said, kid, don't worry about it. you can't spend the money that fast in this early first year. I mean, you're gonna be negotiating contracts, you gotta hire staff, and you're not gonna be able to hire all the staff you want. So you're gonna have, the first year is a very slow, step-by-step year. The second year, you start to get the feel of things. And the first year, you're gonna have a lot of continued community meetings. Because what'll happen in the first year is people who aren't here tonight or online or anything else, they're gonna, what's this new city? What, is this gonna cost me more? No, and you rerun it, you rerun the tape. No, it's gonna cost you less. In fact, we just sent out the property tax levy, and it's 20 cents a thousand less than having stayed with the county. In Pierce County, it was 45 cents less. So it's the second year where you're gonna start. You're walking, crawling and walking that first year. The second year, you're gonna start pretty fast pace and jogging a little bit. The third year, you're kind of entering a little bit of a leveling phase, and areas that you wanted to improve services on, that's when you're starting to ramp those up. About year 5, it's gonna just pretty much level off unless things change. Now, I say unless things change. Do any of you remember an initiative 695? Remember that? It was in 98, maybe 2000. We incorporated, yeah, that was Tim Iman's initiative. Everybody liked the idea of $15 car tax. Who didn't? Okay. Well, what most people didn't know was the money that came from the car tax didn't go to pay for roads or any of that. It went to offset the losses that poor sales tax cities had. Their citizens were paying the sales tax, and the state legislature passed what they called sales tax equalization. And we were talking about Puyallup at 690 or 650, Tacoma at 250, and UP at 40. That differential, the state law basically used the money from the vehicle license fee to raise cities up to an average of 170. Still less than the statewide average that Tacoma was at. But that money there came in. Well, we were just getting ready to go into year 4 and 5, and 695 hit. Any guess as to how much revenue loss I experienced that year following 695? What percentage?
You know, it took the state 3 years to run out of their funds for that. And when that levy passed, when that law passed, I went out and searched the very wealthy cities. They voted against that. It was the poorer communities, the communities in eastern Washington that voted for it.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that were hit by the loss of that sales.
Well, let's not go there about people voting against their own interests.
Sorry.
That has a recent feel to it. Anyway, we lost a third of our general fund. We had just started gearing up police services, parks. We had parks that we had annexed. When UP annexed or UP incorporated, we had 40 acres of parks. Now we have 480. That's 30 years later. Now, half of those are still unimproved, but it's a step by step. When University Place incorporated, we had 50 miles of arterial streets, no arterial street sidewalks. We now have over 400 miles of arterial sidewalks. Step by step, slowly, on average, we built $1 million to $3 million a year in new sidewalks. So those are, your question was, how does this go? It goes slow and picks up momentum. And then somebody throws a monkey wrench in, and then you adjust. But if you are under the county's jurisdiction, they figure out how to adjust. If you incorporate, you figure it out. Now officially, the committee's still in the, we're looking to figure this out stage, as Charmaine said. I've gone from, I don't know, let's see. You know, I'm pretty comfortable this new city would work. And that's not the committee, that's just me. But I am based on some information that I didn't have a year ago. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to speak up.
County roads now, they become the city's responsibility when you incorporate as a city limit.
The question is about the county roads. They transfer to the city.
Now, we incorporate, and now those roads are the responsibility of the city, correct? That were the county roads.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a state highway, which I think you
We
may.
do have.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That stays with the state.
Yeah.
But the local roads transfer to the city. Now, that's,
Like at the city limits, that's where they do it.
and
Do they designate it at the city limits?
it's the city limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my first job in Washington was when I went to Puyallup. That was in 1990. And the gas tax, the state gas tax, then covered about half of our street maintenance budget. Over the last 20, 30 years, that's now down to about 10%. The gas tax doesn't come anywhere near to paying for the cost of road maintenance. And that's true for state government, county government, city government. And the big debate that's going on in Oregon, California, Washington, is do you go away from a gas tax as you go more and more electric vehicles? Do you go to a tax that's based on the miles you drive, the weight of your vehicle, a weight mile tax like truckers pay? We haven't figured that one out. I know one of the questions that Michael asked was, if you have a homeowners association that's paying to take care of its local streets, they're not public streets, but is there a way that the city could help some? Well, first of all, recognizing that the general fund from the gas tax doesn't have a lot of money to play with anyway. But legally, could there be some way to equalize that so that each neighborhood is getting their fair share of what gas tax and stuff there is? Yeah, and that could be done by contract. And there's a number of ways that you could do that. But this committee and I wouldn't be the ones to decide that. That would be the then city council.
Mr. Jean, we just went over time, but I want to make sure that the folks here and steering committee members, if they have any questions, maybe we could do kind of a lightning round.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep
then we can talk afterwards.
And I'll try to keep my comments short. As you figured out, I don't do a lot of prepared statements. I kind of work from bullet points. So,
Pauline had a question.
Pauline,
Okay, so, I mean, I have no doubt we have enough money to run the city. That's not an issue to me. But what is an issue is that you talk about the transition, talk about first year, talk about second year. How do you get the funding for that transition?
I'm sorry.
How do you get the funding, the money for the transition? What's the money trail? Where does the money for the transition come from? And when? do you
Oh,
get the money
okay.
for the- Where's the money trail?
Yeah, we're talking about the phases.
Yeah.
You've got
got
the
that.
study phase. The way you get the money is you stand in the door like a church and you pass the hat. That's the first phase, donations.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing.
And
But like,
the
that's,
study, the county's funding. So
Right.
that's good.
Mhm.
Then the question is that 3 to 4 month period.
Right,
You go to a bank, this is a good story. You go to a bank and it's easier now because there's been more new cities.
Okay.
But we went to the local bank that was in Newcastle. And we went to the VP for that region with the bank. And said, you know, hi, we're starting a new city and we need $500,000 loan. And he goes, how does that work? Who are you? You know, they didn't know. And I said, call the governor's office, they'll vouch for us.
Okay,
You borrow the money. And that was the comment that my friend Al Locke made. Because it was like, well, $500,000, and that was 30 years ago. So maybe it's $1.5 million, $2 million today. And you go, is that, you know, a lot of money? I mean, how do we spend that judiciously? And Al's comment to me was, you can't spend it fast enough. Don't worry about it. You know, so you borrow the money from a local bank. I don't know what your local banking is. What I did,
now, but you have your board is borrowing the money.
that's what I said, when you are in that interim period, you don't have the full powers of a city, but you do have limited powers under the state law. And borrowing money is one of them. So you borrow it and then you repay that. The other thing that happens is the county is going to be collecting. If you incorporate in August, then you're taking on the service responsibilities for September, October, November, December. So 5 months of revenue. The county has to reallocate their proportionate share of that to you. And that's how you pay back your startup loan and get off into business. And there's, from a financial standpoint, if you charted it out, your revenues kind of grow. And it's like a bow wave effect. You folks have boats. You get a bow wave head of the boat, and the expenditures are less. And then that bow wave dips down and your revenues and expenditures start to track. The temptation, and this, any of you that should run for a new city council, remember this, the temptation is to really juice the service levels to show the people this was a really great decision. And you do it by spending that bow wave money. And then you don't have it in the year 2 when you do need it. But if that answers your question, it's, you borrow it to get started, you get the money from the county on their proportionate share that you then use, and then starting that next year, you have your own property tax levy, your own sales tax revenues, all of them.
Did the county give you any other money besides the bill, the property taxes?
No, and most counties don't. And they're gonna, if what the county administrator is saying, they're gonna have a loss if you incorporate. And so they're gonna be making it, they're not gonna be feeling too generous, you know, but it'll work out. And it did for the other, well, you had Spokane County, Kings, Pierce. I think those were the 3 counties. There were, interestingly enough, there were 2 cities that or communities that I was advising, and they were just filthy rich. And if they had incorporated as a new city, they'd have had tons of sales tax. Hazeldale, the area where 205 and I-5 split down north of Vancouver. It's a community, it's a huge sales tax area, very limited population. The other area is Silverdale, over by Bremerton, just north. They got the Silverdale Mall and stuff. And in both of those cases, the Doubting Thomases voted no. No, you can't have more for less. It wouldn't work. You can't do it. So don't pay attention to what those 13 other new cities did, because you're not going to be able to do that. Well, I can tell you right now, you're smart enough as a community, you can do it. And a little more than you wanted. Michael?
Bob, in terms of going to transition, like in the first 5 years, we know that cities, just like counties and other jurisdictions, can get direct grants from the state and from federal funds for infrastructure types of projects. But we had heard that in startup cities, that the state is looking to help even more, like to build a city hall or a police.
Not
station.
so much help with like a city hall, but if you wanted to build a senior center or a community center, there's grants for that. And there's state grants. I'm not sure there's gonna be much help from the federal government left after Doge finishes up, what they're doing, and unless you get a Tesla dealer, I'm not sure, you're gonna get a grant. Sorry, I have my opinions. Capital grants, however, are realistic, and I think the numbers, you thought maybe around 2 million you might have a shot at.
Burnsville had 3.2, and so proportionately, two if we were per capita same.
Yeah. And that's one of those things like 695, with what the feds are doing right now. And, they cut off food for starving children in third world countries, because that was waste. So I don't know what it'll look like. I think state grants are still pretty feasible. I don't know what to count on forecasting with the feds. I think that's all crazy back there, and that's not a partisan statement. It's just Republicans and Democrats. They get that DC fever and they're crazy. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was thinking more of, if you could explain how special grants you can apply for example, for roads. You see, the city of Blaine, building its second.
Yeah,
or
well, one of the ones
build
that he mentioned are the safe route to schools. Now, if you had a school, you probably have a pretty good shot at a safe route improvement. But that's between you guys and the school district. Yeah, I mean, grants are gonna be out there, but grants you have to see as one-time only money. It's opportunities.
Yeah.
There was a book. Those of you that may have heard, you may know Peter Drucker, the guy that wrote all these management theory books for GM and Ford. But his best book was a little skinny one. His books that he was kind were big, thick ones. But his big one was Managing in Turbulent Times. And he talked about keeping an opportunities budget. Any grant that you go for, state or federal, is going to require a local match.
Yeah.
In dollars, and that could be anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I would suggest that some of that bow wave money that I talked about and any other one-time only money that you get, you park that into a contingency or a reserve, what Drucker would call an opportunities budget. And it presents itself and you can move. And I can guarantee you the county is aggressively looking for capital improvement grants and opportunities here.
That's the point I'm trying to make, is the county does get those. They rarely come into this area. I think we've had a roundabout on the list for the last 20 years. And so they allocated.
University Place.
Why?
We built the first modern roundabout.
Really is though that
Yeah.
the city itself, because you have the local control, can start to focus on projects that are important to this
Yeah.
community.
That's the tailoring, that's the targeting, that's that whole ability, and even asking. I'm not sure the county couldn't get some grant opportunities, but they'd have to put up the match. And other communities are vying for that as well. You talked about a roundabout. We built the first modern roundabout in Washington State, and we did it with some grant dollars, but there weren't any rules on how to build or design roundabouts. So we actually had to design the roundabout rules to get the state to approve them so that we could then go for the grant. Do you think the county is gonna do something like that? But the rules are written now. If you want a roundabout, you can do that. I might get questions over here, but you got new committee members. You guys gotta.
We do. I want to be respectful of folks' time because we have gone over a little bit. And maybe we adjourn the meeting, but we can hang out and chat a little bit.
Can we take one more from this group and then the committee? and I
Yeah,
can
already. Chuck, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit curious. I was concerned about or interested in cities in Whatcom County, so while you were speaking, I used my handy phone and I Googled, does Ferndale have a deficit in their budget? Does Linden have a deficit in their budget? Does Bellingham have a deficit in their budget? And they all do. Ferndale's had a deficit for a while, and it's actually, I guess from what I just read, going to be worse this year, even taking out the school, issue, because the school budgets are pretty bad. Bellingham apparently has between a $3.5 and $4 million deficit projected for this coming year. So those are all cities in Whatcom County, and yeah, it sounds pretty rosy that cities are gonna do great with the taxes that they have. So could we then expect Birch Bay would be running deficits forever?
No, and remember, the school district, which is the biggest share of your property tax between the school district and the state, that the state share of the local property tax goes to schools. It's probably about two-thirds of the property tax. So they are very dependent on the valuations of property, ups and downs, how all that revenue comes in. Same thing with the fire district. They don't have sales tax. School district doesn't have sales tax. That's why I keep saying the biggest difference, the internet sales tax is huge as a difference, because that money was just going out generally and not coming back to poor sales tax, poor cities, like Blaine. And now, you're gonna do fine. But the school district, their deficits are tied to a whole different
Right, but that's what I'm
situation.
saying. What I was reading is that parceling out the school deficit, Ferndale would be running a deficit anyway. And Blaine ran through their rainy day fund, well before the Canadian stopped coming and before the school issue came up. So forgetting about the school stuff, but why is most of this stuff pretty rosy, but those three cities aren't?
Well, if you're talking about some of your surrounding cities here, and they're showing a deficit is you're spending more money than you're bringing in. And that's not uncommon for more established long-term cities. They have policy creep or service creep. The new cities tend to not do that. They tend to hold to like a core level. And unless it's really radical, like that 1/3 revenue drop that we have, but we've worked our way out of that. And the city's property tax in UP is still very low. I said I pay $600 a year to the city for police, parks, streets, everything. So a deficit, if Ferndale or Blaine or Bellingham are seeing a deficit, I think they had certain expectations at this level, reasonable expectations of revenues at that level. And then, the Canadians got pissed because they didn't want to be the 51st state. And so now, that's down. Well, is that a deficit? Or is that not having an opportunities budget? Or is that spending more than you can bring in?
Do cities sometimes have deficits in their budget?
The what?
Do cities sometimes have deficits in their budget?
No, you're not allowed to. I mean, if it's a deficit, it's a problem that has to be solved, but you have to have a balanced budget. And you can't adopt a deficit budget. Now, you can have a budget where you're spending more than you're bringing in if you've got a reserve account to do that. We should really, I can talk about the particulars with a committee meeting later, but you want to have what I would call an opportunities contingency, which you don't plan to spend, you plan to hold until, something bad happens. And then you should have a real working contingency, maybe about 5% of your budget or something that you plan to spend that year, but you just don't know where because something's going to go wrong. But that's how you budget, because you have to have a balanced budget.
So is the numbers he's talking about, are they the budget numbers or the actual numbers?
I think it's really interesting to know, like, how do cities actually project their next year's budget?
That's right.
And so you have to balance your budget every year, right? But cities generally assume they spend 100%, they fill 100% of the positions, things like that. They don't actually budget for the actual operations. And so I think Chuck's asked a really good question. Are we gonna be perpetually in deficit?
No, you're gonna want, yeah, what you wanna do is do a 5-year forecast. And you build a baseline of the services you want to provide and what they're gonna cost over 5 years. And then you're gonna do a forecast of the revenues that you expect. And when you actually build the budget, not a 5-year forecast, but an actual budget, then you're gonna actually target the revenues you expect to bring in. And then you'll adjust those, if the expenditures are up here and the new revenue adjustment are a little lower, you're gonna bring them down. We had a deficit my last year in UP before I retired. And we were off about, not quite 20, but about 10% of our general fund. And I had to cut back both in police services and in Parks and Rec. And for some reason, I don't know how we did it, but the staff was sitting, in seats like that facing the council. And normally, I think because we had a bigger crowd stuff. So I'm sitting there with my back to the audience. Normally I would face the audience. Oh, I could feel the heat. I mean, but I thought they were there because they were pissed that we were cutting off police. UP has a pretty low crime rate. They said, we can live with that. So recreation that we're upset about. Well, we didn't have any choices unless they wanted to approve a Parks and Rec levy. And they didn't want to do that. We're all Americans. We want everything. We just want somebody else to pay for it.
I think that's a great place.
Carol.
Question is there a difference in a community like ours that's residential resort and communities that are not, that aren't the resort, that generally
Yeah, I think
more in the summer?
on average, it's a given that there's no city in the state that's average. They're all different. And if you have a resort community, your big variable, tourism, if you can, if you could get more year round where your business could stay open year round, that would have a really favorable effect. But if you're a pure residential community, on average, I just said on average, there's nobody average. On average, purely residential communities require more services than they pay for. Residential property is an economic loser. The ideal community would be a resort or a refinery and 10 residents.
Yeah.
Because they could be the city council.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Thank you, Caprice. I was gonna ask, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thanks for the great questions. Bob, thank you so much.
And particularly for new committee members that haven't, you're still ramping up. You guys have questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming.